Why are we often so unconvincing when speaking to others? Hello and welcome to Communication, Psychology and HR. My name is Gerhard. I'm a psychologist from Hamburg, Germany, here in the Republic of Moldova for almost 20 years. I work at the university, I'm a researcher and also a consultant to private companies. This may be one of the most pressing issues most of us have, apart from defensive motives like I don't want to look stupid and I'm afraid of speaking in public. But on the positive side, on the aspirational side, we want to convince others. We want to persuade and influence. Now, watching ourselves on camera is often painful. We see so many defects and we may ask ourselves, how can anybody believe me or trust me or be convinced of what I'm telling? But stepping aside from our self-criticism, actually, if we look at others around us, they also are not very convincing very often. Otherwise, we would change opinions quite quickly, but we typically don't. So, what's the issue here? The issue is, it's again tedious to repeat, human communication is actually quite complex. And the complexity is on the outside, so the situation, the other person, and it's on the inside, what's happening in our thoughts, emotions, feelings, expectations, fears, hopes. And perfect communication doesn't exist. What we are always, it's like in the economy with the price system and on the foreign exchange and so on, there's always a fluctuation. And what we can strive for is to find a better fit between what's inside of us and what's outside of us. So we need to fit our inner reality to the outer reality. Now, this fit will never be perfect. Why? For example, talking about the inner fit, the inner reality, imagine you are interrupted by someone. At work, when a colleague enters, you were doing a report, or at home, your children, my children, our children could enter any moment and interrupt this recording. Now, we may like our coworker and we probably love our children. However, inside of us there is also a voice of anger or disappointment. Didn't I tell you that I'm working on my report? Didn't I put a sign on the door, don't disturb? Or didn't I tell my children that daddy is making his usual videos? So those voices are inside of every one of us. Of course, some people have suppressed one or the other voice. There are people who habitually react friendly, and they think of themselves as very loving parents and loving co-workers, and the voice being annoyed is very, very deep down repressed. But if you provoke that person, that always friendly and altruistic person, at a certain point, the anger will come up. And on the other hand, there are people who habitually react with aggression. And although they love their children and although they like to be around their co-workers, their habitual reaction is annoyment. So, what should we do? What typically happens is we enter an interaction with somebody, and the dominant reaction, the dominant attitude prevails on the surface, but all the other suppressed or not listened to parts of ourselves, they also manifest themselves. So you may say, if you're they're friendly outside, you say, well, I'm happy, nice to see you again. It's great to see you. Thank you for coming. But you will not smile as authentically as you do. So the suppressed voices, they will find a way to give signals through your body language. And for the observer, this is evident. So you cannot control all your body languages. language or signs. So while you believe you are being clear and expressing your happiness that your colleague interrupted you, the person picks up on those signals, and you are perceived as incoherent and unconvincing. So this, I'm happy you are here, doesn't sound very convincing, correct? And this happens all the time because in any given situation, we have a mixed bag of attitudes, emotions, fears, and so on. You are in a job interview. Of course, on the one hand, you are excited about the new salary. You are hopeful. You feel optimistic because you are the right person. But you have also fear inside of you. And that fear manifests itself in some kinds of nervous gestures or a higher pitch of your voice and so on. So it's very, very difficult to convince other human beings that you are congruent if you are inside in a turmoil. And there are people who want to look very tough, and we know certainly of many politicians that are like that internationally, but even a small child picks up on their nervousness. So they actually look very anxious. So what's the solution here? First, there's no shortcut, no life hack that will help you. There are no magic words you can say. But the first step would be to acknowledge this reality. Because if you don't, then your habitual reaction will take the lead. But all these other voices, they will sabotage your communication quite quickly. So, and a good strategy would be in public speaking or in interactions with human beings in front of you in an office to somehow express this to the other person. So to say, well, actually, I'm happy to see you on the one hand. On the other hand, I was just writing the report, so you see, I'm a bit annoyed. Or so you express, you tell the other person that a glimpse of what's inside of you. That may be sometimes very helpful. And public speakers often do this by acknowledging, well, I'm actually quite nervous here. It's my first time at this university, and well, everything depends on how you say it, on the situation, but very often acknowledging vulnerabilities is reciprocated and makes you more human and more trustworthy than pretending you are the perfect facade while actually showing all kinds of nervousness on stage. So it's better to acknowledge it, and you don't need to go deep into all kinds of inner emotions, but if you just say, well, I'm actually a bit confused in this situation. I don't know what to say, what to feel. No, on the one hand, I'm very angry to be interrupted. On the other hand, I'm happy to see you. Well, probably it's a too lengthy conversation in that situation. But imagine you have a difficult discussion with a coworker. You need to discipline somebody, and typically we as a manager we want to be like a poker face, but it would actually help the conversation. We say, well, I must admit it's quite difficult for me to have this conversation with you because on the one hand you are one of our best employees and we like being around you and so on. On the other hand, we have some issues that make it difficult for me to work calmly, and so on. So that's one solution to communicate it to some adequate degree, depending on the culture situation to the other person. And the other thing is to be more aware of this yourself before a conversation. Just acknowledge I have this conflicting opinions in my head, and even the fact that you acknowledge this will already set in motion a process in you almost automatically that some part of your brain will start organizing this and bringing in some kind of coherence. So you, of course, it would be nice to figure it out, like to make introspection of 5 minutes and find a common ground between all your contradicting positions. This is of course important if you negotiate something important, and people professionally do this, but you can't do this before any conversation. But if you just stop yourself and think, well, now my child is calling during my job, or my mother, and just for 10 seconds acknowledge that you are happy, you are angry, you are anxious, what may she tell me, and so on, and leave it at this, and then take the call. Just acknowledge this inner plurality. Probably that alone will already make you sound much more convincing, because at least you will not cling blindly to your dominant reaction, may it be the friendly or the aggressive one, or the stressful one, and so on. And sometimes the habitual reaction is, for example, fear. But if you look inside yourself, you will see, well, yes, fear is dominant, but I have a voice inside of me that's quite optimistic, and say maybe it will be a positive call. So, and just being aware that there is this possibility opens up opportunities in the conversation. And if you don't believe me, you try to make it scientifically and start videotaping yourself or recording yourself, if it's legally possible, of course, and try to see the difference when you take 5 seconds to listen into your inner dialogue before and without doing this, and observe if something changes. I hope this was somehow inspiring, provoking. Please write me your questions and comments, and see you next week. Bye bye.